The morning sun crept through the blinds at the Sunrise Diner as May wiped down the counter for what felt like the 1,000th time. 5 years she had worked here, 5 years of memorizing regular customers' orders, of sore feet, of forcing smiles even on her worst days. But May never complained. As a single mother to her 8-year-old daughter Lily, she was grateful for every dollar that helped keep a roof over their heads and food on their table. "Order up," called out Rick from the kitchen, sliding 2 plates of steaming pancakes onto the pass-through counter. May grabbed the plates and delivered them to the elderly couple in booth 5 with a genuine smile. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson had been coming in every Thursday morning for as long as May had worked there. They always left her a $5 tip, no matter if their bill was $12 or $20. "Thank you, dear," Mrs. Henderson said, patting May's hand. "How's that little girl of yours doing in school?" "She's doing great," May replied, her tired eyes lighting up at the mention of Lily. "She just got chosen for the science fair. We've been working on her project every night." This was May's life, simple, predictable, and honest. She wasn't rich by any stretch of the imagination, but she had built something stable for herself and Lily after years of struggle. What she didn't know was that today, everything was about to change. The bell above the diner door jingled as a middle-aged man in a worn suit walked in. He took a seat at the counter, his eyes darting around the restaurant nervously. Something about him seemed off to May. His suit was expensive but deliberately shabby, like someone trying to look less well-off than they actually were. "Morning," May greeted him with her usual warmth. "Coffee to start?" "Yes, please," the man replied, his voice softer than his appearance would suggest. "And whatever breakfast special you recommend." As May poured his coffee, she noticed his hands. They were too smooth for someone who looked like they worked hard for a living. No calluses, no rough edges, perfectly manicured nails. In her 5 years of waitressing, May had become good at reading people. This man was playing a part. Over the next hour, the diner filled with the usual morning crowd, truck drivers, office workers grabbing breakfast to go, and retired locals who came as much for the conversation as for the food. The man at the counter, who introduced himself as Joe, seemed particularly interested in how the diner was run. "Been working here long?" he asked between bites of scrambled eggs. 5 years, May answered, refilling his coffee. "It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills." Joe nodded thoughtfully. "Management treat you well?" May hesitated. The owner, Dave, was notoriously tight-fisted. The staff hadn't seen a raise in 3 years, the equipment was falling apart, and just last week the air conditioning had broken down during the hottest day of summer. But May wasn't one to badmouth her workplace to strangers. "It's a job," she said diplomatically. "We make it work." Joe seemed to appreciate her discretion. "I'm actually looking for work myself," he said, watching her reaction carefully. "Any chance they're hiring?" May thought about the "Help Wanted" sign that had been in the window for months. Nobody stayed at Sunrise Diner very long except for her and the cook. The pay was too low, the hours too long, and Dave's temper too short. "We're always short-staffed," she admitted. "I can put in a word with the manager if you want." 2 days later, Joe was hired as a busboy. May showed him the ropes, how to quickly clear tables, which customers liked their refills without asking, and how to avoid Dave's wrath. Joe was a surprisingly good worker for someone who clearly hadn't done this kind of job before. He was humble, eager to learn, and generous with his time, staying late to help May close up without complaining. "You don't have to do that," May told him one night as he mopped the floor after hours. "They don't pay overtime here." Joe shrugged. "I don't mind. You've been helping me a lot, it's the least I can do." Over the next few weeks, May and Joe developed an easy friendship. He told her he'd lost his previous job when his company downsized, and he was just trying to stay afloat until something better came along. May shared stories about Lily and her dreams of someday opening her own small cafe where she could bake the desserts her grandmother had taught her to make. One particularly busy Saturday, the ancient dishwasher finally gave up with a screech and a plume of smoke. Dishes piled up rapidly, customers grew impatient, and Dave was screaming at everyone in sight. "This is ridiculous," Joe muttered as he and May frantically washed dishes by hand in the overflowing sink. "That machine should have been replaced years ago." "Dave says there's no money in the budget," May explained, her hands red and raw from the hot water and industrial detergent. Joe frowned. "But this place is always packed. Where's all the money going?" May just shook her head. It wasn't her place to question. She needed this job too much to rock the boat. Later that evening, as they were closing up, May found Joe in the office, looking through some papers on Dave's desk. "What are you doing?" she asked, alarmed. "You can't be in here." Joe looked up, his expression serious. "May, these books don't add up. According to these numbers, this place makes more than enough to replace equipment, give everyone raises, and still turn a healthy profit." May felt a chill run down her spine. "Put those back. If Dave catches you..." "He's stealing from you," Joe interrupted. "From all of you. And probably cheating on his taxes too." "That's not our business," May insisted, though doubt had begun to creep in. "Please, Joe. I can't afford to lose this job." Joe reluctantly put the papers back, but over the next few days, May caught him watching Dave with a calculating expression. He began asking the other staff questions about their pay, about how long equipment had been broken, about whether they'd ever seen an inspector come by. "You need to stop," May warned him during a quiet moment. "Dave already thinks you're trouble. He told me yesterday he's thinking of letting you go." "Let him," Joe said with surprising confidence. "But May, you deserve better than this. All of you do." The following Monday, everything fell apart. Dave called May into his office, his face red with anger. "You've been helping that new guy snoop around my business," he accused. "Don't deny it. Lisa saw you two looking at my papers." "I was just telling him to put them back," May protested, her heart pounding. "I would never." "You're fired," Dave cut her off. "Collect your last check on Friday. And tell your boyfriend he's done too." May stood there, stunned. 5 years of loyal service, never late, never called in sick, and this was how it ended. Tears stung her eyes as she thought about Lily, about their rent due next week, about the science fair materials she'd promised to buy. As she walked out of the office in a daze, she found Joe waiting for her in the hallway. "I heard," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry, May. This is my fault." "It doesn't matter whose fault it is," she replied, fighting back tears as she untied her apron. "I needed this job." Joe touched her arm gently. "Trust me when I say things will work out. Can you meet me tomorrow at the cafe across the street? 10 a.m. May nodded numbly, too devastated to argue. As she walked home, the weight of uncertainty pressed down on her shoulders. How would she tell Lily? What would they do now? Little did May know that Joe wasn't who he appeared to be, and that tomorrow's meeting would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. That night, May could barely sleep. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on her chest as she stared at the ceiling of her small apartment. From the next room, she could hear Lily's soft breathing. How would she tell her daughter that Mommy had lost her job? How would they manage now? Morning came too quickly. May dropped Lily off at school with a forced smile, promising to help with her science project later. She held it together until Lily disappeared through the school doors, then let the tears finally fall as she walked to the cafe where she was supposed to meet Joe. The cafe was busy with the morning rush when May arrived. She spotted Joe sitting at a corner table, but he wasn't alone. A sharply dressed woman sat beside him, her posture straight and professional, a leather portfolio on the table in front of her. "May, thank you for coming," Joe stood up as she approached. Something about him had changed. He carried himself differently, more confident, more authoritative. "This is Priya," Joe gestured to the woman. "She's the head of human resources for Sunrise Restaurant Group." May's confusion must have shown on her face. Joe motioned for her to sit down. "I haven't been entirely honest with you," he began. "My name isn't Joe. It's Robert Chen. I'm the CEO of Sunrise Restaurant Group, which purchased your diner 3 months ago." May felt like the floor had dropped from beneath her. The mysterious customer, the busboy who asked too many questions, he was the boss all along? "I always spend time working in our newly acquired locations," Robert explained. "It gives me a true picture of how things are run, how employees are treated, what's working and what isn't." Dave was supposed to have informed the staff about the change in ownership, but clearly, he didn't. "Dave fired us," May said quietly. "Actually, he can't fire anyone," Priya interjected. "He's no longer the manager. Based on what Robert has observed and the financial discrepancies he's found, Dave has been terminated, effective immediately." May sat back, trying to process everything. "So, what happens now?" Robert leaned forward. "What happens now is up to you, May. In the 5 years you've worked at that diner, you've never missed a day. Customers love you. Staff respect you. You know every aspect of the operation. We'd like to offer you the position of general manager," Priya said, sliding a document across the table. "With a significant increase in salary, health benefits, and flexible scheduling to accommodate your daughter's needs." May stared at the paper, certain she must be dreaming. The salary listed was more than double what she had been making. I don't have management experience," she stammered. "You have 5 years of experience in what works and what doesn't," Robert countered. "You have integrity, work ethic, and you care about people. Those things can't be taught. And we provide management training," Priya added with a smile. May's hands trembled as she skimmed the contract. "What about the other staff?" "Everyone keeps their jobs, with proper wages," Robert assured her. "And we're investing in new equipment immediately. The diner will be closed for renovations for 2 weeks, but everyone will be paid during that time." Tears welled in May's eyes again, but these were different from the ones she'd shed earlier. These were tears of relief, of disbelief, of a weight suddenly lifted. "Why me?" she asked softly. Robert's expression grew serious. "Because when I asked you about management, you were loyal even when they didn't deserve it. Because you work harder than anyone I've ever seen. Because when I looked through those papers in the office, you didn't think about what you could gain, you worried about losing the job your daughter depends on." May looked down at the contract again, her future suddenly transformed from uncertainty to possibility. "Do you need time to think about it?" Priya asked gently. May took a deep breath and reached for the pen. 2 weeks later, the Sunrise Diner was transformed. Fresh paint brightened the walls, new booths replaced the cracked vinyl ones, and the kitchen gleamed with modern equipment. But the biggest change wasn't visible, it was in the atmosphere. Gone was the cloud of stress and tension that had hung over the place for years. On the morning of the reopening, May arrived an hour early. She stood in the middle of the empty restaurant, taking it all in. Her restaurant. The thought still felt surreal. The staff began to arrive, their faces a mix of curiosity and caution. Many hadn't believed May when she called to tell them about the ownership change and renovations. Some thought it was an elaborate prank. "Welcome," May greeted them, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I know this is a big change for all of us, but I promise it's a good one." She outlined the new policies: fair wages, proper breaks, a profit-sharing plan, and a zero-tolerance policy for abuse from customers. As she spoke, she could see the skepticism in their eyes slowly give way to hope. Any questions? She asked when she finished. Rick, the cook who had worked at the diner even longer than May, raised his hand. Is this for real? Because I've heard promises before. It's real, May assured him. And if anything ever feels wrong or unfair, my door is always open. The reopening day was busier than anyone expected. Word had spread about the renovations, and locals were curious. The Henderson couple were among the first customers, claiming their usual booth. Look at you, dear, Mrs. Henderson beamed at May in her new manager's outfit. We always knew you were meant for bigger things. As the day progressed, May moved between helping with orders, solving problems, and making sure everything ran smoothly. Despite being overwhelmed, she felt a strange new confidence growing within her. This was where she belonged. During the afternoon lull, Robert Chen stopped by. He walked through the diner, chatting with staff and customers alike, no longer pretending to be anyone other than himself. How's it going? He asked May when they finally had a moment alone. Busy. Challenging. Wonderful, she replied honestly. I still can't believe this is happening. Robert smiled. You earned it. Not many people would have been kind to a busboy who seemed suspicious. Your compassion revealed your character. May thought about how close she had come to reporting Joe's snooping to Dave. How different things might have been. I made a complete training manual for the company, Robert told her. But there's a section I couldn't finish, about creating a positive work environment where staff feel valued. I was hoping you might write that part. May looked at him in surprise. Me? Who better? You maintained your dignity and kindness in a toxic workplace for 5 years. That's a rare strength. As Robert left, May noticed Lily peering through the front window of the diner, face pressed against the glass. School had ended, and she had walked over by herself, eager to see her mother's new position. May waved her in, heart swelling with pride as she prepared to show her daughter what Mommy had accomplished. For the first time in years, May felt like she was not just surviving, but beginning to thrive. And the journey was just beginning. A month into her new role as manager, May faced her first real challenge. The morning delivery truck had broken down, leaving them without fresh produce for the day. Customers were already lining up outside, and the staff looked to her for direction. In the past, Dave would have yelled, blamed everyone but himself, and served whatever they had left, quality be damned. But May wasn't Dave. Rick, check our freezer inventory and create a special menu with what we have, she instructed calmly. Jean, call the local farmers market and see what they can deliver within the hour. I'll explain to the customers and offer coffee on the house while they wait. When she opened the doors, May was honest with the waiting crowd. We're having supply issues this morning, but we're working to fix it. Your patience means the world to us, and the coffee is complimentary while we sort things out. Instead of complaints, she received understanding nods and even offers of help from regular customers. One man mentioned his brother owned a produce stand just outside town. Another woman offered to pick up extra milk on her way back from dropping her kids at school. By mid-morning, the diner was operating almost normally, serving a makeshift but delicious menu that customers seemed to enjoy even more than the regular offerings. You turned a disaster into an opportunity, Rick commented as the lunch rush wound down. Dave would have had us all in tears by now. May smiled. I learned a long time ago that panic doesn't solve problems. People do. That evening, as May was closing up, she found a note from Robert Chen in her office mailbox asking her to call him. With a mix of curiosity and nervousness, she dialed his number. May, I heard about your creative solution today, Robert said when he answered. Word travels fast in this business. I just did what needed to be done, she replied modestly. Exactly. And that's why I'm calling. We've acquired another struggling diner in the next town over. The staff there are demoralized, the quality has slipped, and customers are leaving in droves. May listened, wondering where this was heading. "I'd like you to visit, observe, and advise," Robert continued. "Just one day next week. I think your perspective would be invaluable." "Me?" May asked, surprised. "I've only been managing for a month." "Sometimes the freshest eyes see what veterans miss," Robert replied. "And you have something special, May. You understand that a restaurant isn't just about food, it's about people feeling valued, both customers and staff." After they hung up, May sat at her desk, contemplating how much her life had changed. From a struggling waitress to a manager whose opinion was valued by the CEO himself. She thought about the science fair project she and Lily had completed last weekend without the usual stress of tight finances hanging over them. She thought about the staff who now smiled when they came to work. All because she had shown kindness to a stranger who turned out to be much more than he seemed. As May locked up the diner and headed home, she wondered what new challenges and opportunities awaited her at the struggling diner next week. One thing was certain, she was ready for whatever came next. The Golden Griddle Diner sat at the edge of Pinewood, a small town 30 minutes from May's own. As she pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, she immediately noticed the differences from her revitalized Sunrise Diner. The paint was peeling, the sign had burned out letters, and even from outside, she could sense the lack of energy. Taking a deep breath, May pushed open the door. A bell jingled half-heartedly above her, but no one looked up. 3 customers sat scattered throughout the restaurant, each looking as disinterested in their food as the staff seemed in serving it. "Take any seat," a tired voice called out from behind the counter. The waitress didn't even look up from her phone. May chose a booth with a good view of the entire operation and waited. And waited. After nearly 10 minutes without anyone approaching her table, she walked to the counter herself. "Excuse me," she said gently. "Could I see a menu?" The waitress, Tanya, according to her name tag, sighed dramatically before sliding a sticky menu across the counter. "Coffee?" she asked in a monotone. "Please," May nodded, trying to catch the young woman's eye. As May observed throughout her meal, she saw all the signs of a failing business: food served lukewarm, long waits, indifferent service, and a general cloud of resignation hanging over everyone. It reminded her of Sunrise Diner in its final days under Dave's management. When she finished eating, May asked to speak with the manager. A harried-looking woman in her 40s emerged from the back office, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "What's the problem?" she asked curtly. "No problem," May smiled, extending her hand. "I'm May from Sunrise Diner. Robert Chen asked me to stop by." The manager's demeanor changed instantly. "You're the waitress who became manager? The one he was testing undercover?" "That's me," May confirmed. "Mind if we chat for a few minutes?" In the cramped back office, the manager, Donna, unloaded her frustrations. Staff calling in sick constantly, suppliers raising prices, equipment breaking down, and customers complaining about everything. "It's impossible to keep this place running," Donna concluded. "I've tried everything." May nodded sympathetically. "It's hard when you feel like you're fighting alone." "Exactly," Donna exclaimed, seeming relieved that someone understood. "Would you mind if I talk to your staff?" May asked. "Sometimes a fresh perspective helps." Throughout the afternoon, May spoke with each employee, not as a corporate spy or an outside expert, but as someone who had been in their shoes. She asked about their challenges, their ideas for improvement, and what kept them coming to work despite the difficulties. By the end of the day, May had filled a small notebook with observations and suggestions. But her most valuable insight wasn't something she could write down, it was the realization that Golden Griddle's problems weren't about systems or even finances. They were about disconnection. The staff didn't feel connected to their work, to each other, or to Donna. They were just going through motions, collecting paychecks, counting minutes until they could leave. As May drove home, she thought about how to convey this to Robert. The diner didn't just need new equipment or a fresh coat of paint. It needed heart. It needed someone who could rebuild the human connections that made a restaurant more than just a place to eat. And suddenly, May knew exactly what needed to be done. The next morning, May called Robert Chen and requested an unusual meeting, not at his corporate office, but at the struggling Golden Griddle. "I think I understand what's happening there," she explained, "but I need you to see it firsthand." 3 days later, they sat in the same booth where May had waited for service. Robert was dressed casually, nothing like the polished CEO he usually appeared to be. They ordered coffee and waited, experiencing the same indifferent service May had encountered before. "Now I see what you mean," Robert said quietly after their waitress wandered off without refilling their cups. "But the question remains, how do we fix it?" "I've been thinking about that," May replied. "When you came to Sunrise as Joe the busboy, you learned things no consultant's report could ever tell you. You felt what it was like to work there." Robert nodded, beginning to understand where she was heading. "Donna is burned out," May continued. "She's managing with spreadsheets and schedules, but she's lost touch with her people. She needs to remember what it feels like to be in their shoes." "You're suggesting role reversal?" Robert asked, intrigued. "Not exactly," May smiled. "I'm suggesting connection. A reset." May's plan was simple but radical. For 2 weeks, the Golden Griddle would close for renovations. During that time, the entire staff, including Donna, would work at Sunrise Diner alongside May's team, experiencing a functional, positive workplace culture firsthand. "It's not just about teaching them new systems," May explained. "It's about letting them feel what it's like when a restaurant works as a community, not just a business." Robert considered the idea. "It's unconventional. Training usually happens in classrooms, not on the job at a different location." "That's the problem," May said earnestly. "Conventional training hasn't worked here. They need to experience the difference, not just learn about it." To May's surprise, Robert agreed to her plan. The real challenge was convincing Donna and her staff to participate. Many were skeptical, some openly hostile to the idea of training at a different restaurant. "Why should we listen to her?" Tanya asked defiantly when Donna announced the plan. "She's just another corporate spy." "Actually," May stepped forward, having anticipated this reaction, "I was a waitress for 5 years. I know what it's like when management doesn't care, when equipment fails, when customers are rude, and when paychecks barely cover the bills." She looked around at the wary faces. "I'm not here to tell you how to do your jobs. I'm here because I remember what it's like to feel stuck, and I found a way out. I want to share that with you, if you'll let me." Her honesty seemed to touch something in the room. The defensiveness didn't disappear completely, but it softened. 2 weeks, May promised. "Give me 2 weeks of your time. If you still think this place can't be turned around after that, at least you'll have new skills for your resume." One by one, the staff reluctantly agreed. Even Tanya, the most resistant, eventually nodded her consent. As May drove home that evening, she felt the weight of their expectations on her shoulders. She had convinced Robert Chen to try something unorthodox. She had promised these demoralized workers a chance at something better. Now she had to deliver. The first day of the exchange program, as May came to call it, was as chaotic as she had expected. The Golden Griddle staff arrived at Sunrise Diner looking uncomfortable and out of place. Donna stood stiffly by the entrance, clipboard in hand, clearly trying to maintain her authority despite being on unfamiliar ground. "Welcome," May greeted them warmly. "Today we're going to do things a little differently. No formal training, no lectures. You'll just work alongside us, and we'll learn from each other." She paired each Golden Griddle employee with a Sunrise counterpart. Tanya, the resistant waitress, was paired with Jean, May's most patient server. Donna would shadow May herself. This feels like kindergarten, Tanya muttered as Jean showed her the table layout. Jean just smiled. Maybe. But even grown-ups need a fresh start sometimes. Throughout that first morning, the tension was palpable. The Golden Griddle staff moved hesitantly, expecting criticism or correction at every turn. But the Sunrise team, coached by May, focused on collaboration rather than instruction. By lunchtime, small changes were already visible. When a customer spilled a drink, Tanya automatically tensed, expecting the blame game she was used to at Golden Griddle. Instead, she watched in surprise as Jean calmly cleaned up the mess, made a joke that set the customer at ease, and moved on without drama. "You didn't get mad," Tanya observed later. "What good would that do?" Jean replied simply. "Spills happen. Life goes on." Meanwhile, May guided Donna through her daily routine, from morning inventory to staff check-ins to handling customer feedback. "You spend a lot of time talking to your employees," Donna noted with surprise. "At Golden Griddle, I'm always too busy with paperwork." "People before paperwork," May responded. "Happy staff make happy customers. The numbers follow naturally." By the end of the first week, subtle shifts were happening. The Golden Griddle staff began relaxing, asking questions, even offering suggestions. Tanya, once so defensive, stayed late one evening to learn how Jean created the schedule that gave everyone fair access to the busiest shifts with the best tips. Donna, however, was still struggling. After observing her for several days, May realized the problem. Donna saw management as control rather than support. On Friday afternoon, May took Donna aside. "Tomorrow, I'd like you to try something different. Leave your clipboard in the office and work the floor as a server." "A server?" Donna looked shocked. "But I haven't waited tables in 15 years. "Exactly," May said gently. "I think you've forgotten what it feels like. The sore feet, the juggling of tasks, the direct impact of a broken coffee machine or a complicated customer." Donna wanted to refuse, May could see it in her eyes, but something stopped her. Perhaps it was seeing the transformation in her own staff, or maybe it was simple curiosity about May's methods. "One shift," Donna finally agreed. "But I don't see how this helps me become a better manager." "Trust the process," May replied with a smile. "Sometimes we need to step backward before we can move forward." As the first week of the exchange ended, May felt cautiously optimistic. Seeds of change were taking root, but the real test would come tomorrow, when Donna stepped back into her staff's shoes for the first time in years. What happened next would determine whether Golden Griddle had any chance of survival. Saturday morning brought the busiest shift of the week at Sunrise Diner. Donna arrived early, nervously fidgeting with the server's apron May handed her. "The specials are on this card," May explained, pointing to a laminated sheet. "Jean will be with you for the first hour, then you'll handle tables 5 through 8 on your own." Donna nodded stiffly, her usual confidence nowhere to be seen. For someone who had spent years giving orders, taking them felt foreign and uncomfortable. The morning rush hit hard and fast. Families with children, weekend workers grabbing breakfast, and regulars all poured in at once. Donna struggled to keep up, forgetting orders, mixing up tables, and spilling coffee on a customer's newspaper. "I'm so sorry," she apologized profusely, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Don't worry about it," the man replied kindly. "My wife says I read too much news anyway." By midday, Donna was exhausted. Her feet throbbed, her back ached, and she had a new appreciation for what her staff dealt with daily. During her break, she collapsed into a chair in the back room, where Tanya was also resting. "Harder than it looks, isn't it?" Tanya said, without her usual edge. Donna nodded, too tired for pretense. "I'd forgotten." "You know what's weird?" Tanya continued. "Here, when something goes wrong, people help each other. At our place, we're all just trying to avoid getting blamed." The simple observation hit Donna like a revelation. She thought about all the times she'd scolded staff for problems without offering solutions, all the energy she'd spent tracking mistakes instead of preventing them. When her break ended, Donna returned to the floor with new eyes. She noticed things she'd never paid attention to before: how May quietly stepped in when a server was overwhelmed, how the cook communicated timing with a simple nod, how regular customers were greeted by name. Near the end of her shift, Donna had her most difficult table, a family with 3 young children, one of whom immediately spilled orange juice everywhere. In the past, Donna would have seen this as an annoyance, an inefficiency to be managed. Today, she saw a frazzled mother trying her best. "Let me help with that," Donna said, quickly mopping up the spill. "And how about some crayons for the little ones? We keep them behind the counter." The mother's grateful smile was worth more than any spreadsheet optimization Donna had ever achieved. When the day finally ended, Donna found May in the office. "I think I understand now," Donna said quietly. "I've been running a restaurant, but I haven't been building a team." May nodded. "It's an easy trap to fall into when you're focused on survival. The systems, the checklists, they're important," Donna acknowledged. "But they're not everything. They're tools, not solutions," May agreed. "People are the heart of any restaurant." As Donna drove home that evening, her body ached, but her mind was clearer than it had been in years. She thought about Golden Griddle, not as a failing business to be salvaged, but as a community waiting to be rebuilt. For the first time in months, she felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. And she wasn't the only one changing. Back at Sunrise Diner, as May locked up for the night, she realized that in teaching others, she had discovered something important about herself too. 1 month later, Golden Griddle reopened its doors. From the outside, the changes were obvious: fresh paint, a new sign, updated landscaping. But the real transformation waited inside. May stood with Robert Chen near the entrance, watching as Donna welcomed the first customers with genuine warmth. Tanya, once surly and disengaged, moved efficiently between tables, making eye contact and smiling as she took orders. "You did it," Robert said, clearly impressed. "When I asked you to visit this place, I never expected such a complete turnaround." May shook her head. "They did it themselves. They just needed to remember why they got into this business in the first place." The diner was packed, partly with curious locals who'd heard about the renovation, but also with many of Donna's former regular customers who had drifted away over the years. "The food's better than I remember," an elderly man told May as she stopped by his table. "And nobody's rushing us out the door anymore." In the kitchen, the cook who had once barely communicated with the front staff now called out friendly warnings when orders were almost ready. The busboy who had previously been invisible was now being introduced to customers by name. Near the end of the successful reopening day, Donna gathered her staff for a quick huddle during a quiet moment. "Thank you all for taking this journey with me," she said, her usual business-like demeanor softened by genuine emotion. "This place isn't just mine, it's ours." As the staff dispersed, Donna approached May. "I don't know how to thank you. You didn't just save a business, you helped us build something meaningful." "That's what happens when you treat people like people, not problems," May replied. Later, as May prepared to leave, Robert pulled her aside. "I've been thinking. We have 3 more diners in the region that could use this kind of transformation. Would you consider taking on a new role, something like Director of Culture and Training?" May blinked in surprise. "Me? I've only been a manager for a few months." Robert smiled. "Sometimes the best teachers are those who remember what it was like not to know." That evening, as May drove home to Lily, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From waitress to manager to mentor to whatever this new role might be, all because she had shown kindness to a customer who turned out to be an undercover boss. Life could change in an instant, for better or worse. May had experienced both. But now she understood something important. It wasn't just luck or circumstance that determined which way things would go. It was how you treated people along the way.